Chapter 37 Legislation. Are you ready? Kronos asked in front of a palace complex on the top of the sacred mountain. Although he was not in charge of the legislation as the king of gods, he would also have a share of the world's rewards. Of course. What about your decree? The 1200 years had left no trace on Themis. On the contrary, years of running around had made her eyes more steady and sharp. She looked at Kronos and asked him for the last thing needed for legislation. Use this, the scepter of the king of gods. My brother who dominates the outer sea is extremely powerful. In addition to the mountain gods of Uriah and the star gods in the sky, his descendants alone are more than the gods of chaos. Kronos' voice was flat and there was no extra emotion when he talked about Oceanus. His former elder brother used the essence of the sea and the origin of the priesthood to forge a scepter of the sea for himself to command the sea. So Kronos followed suit and forged a scepter of his own. But once the Sea King's scepter came out, thousands of ocean gods obeyed. And no one cares about Kronos' decree of the king of the gods until now. The command cannot be issued from the god mountain, this is Kronos now. Even the earth has long been occupied by many river gods, lake gods, and mountain gods. In their eyes, the ranking of the king of the gods is basically a fact that does not need to be stated. It's not a good thing to follow others, Kronos. The gods will remember the first one, but few people know the second one. Taking the scepter inlaid with 3 color gems, Themis reminded her brother. This is the sentence she heard from Lyanna, and the goddess of justice feels that it makes sense. For thousands of years, she has visited the spirit world many times, and then reproduced what she learned on Mount Odalis. She did not take it without asking, because Leon was happy to see it happen. Themis's behavior not only did not harm his interests, but also accelerated his absorption of chaos-related source power. Maybe. But the strongest one is also the first, isn't it? Kronos' voice was much more confident than hundreds of years ago, or rather, the growing power of the God King gave him this confidence, and he was already planning to do something. The God King inlaid 3 gems on the scepter, hoping that one day he could use it to command the sky, the earth and the ocean. On that day, perhaps he would have the confidence to fight against the curse left by the father, or even the unspeakable fate. However, unlike Kronos, in the face of the God King's response, Themis nodded. But she was not optimistic about her brother in her heart. Unless he can have the power comparable to the original god and become the king of gods in the true sense, otherwise the strongest one is just empty talk. But Kronos couldn't do this at all relying on his priesthood alone. Sky has the potential for great divine power, because the Father is the incarnation of the sky. But Kronos, even if Themis didn't know that he was missing the origin, he originally only occupied more than 30% of the origin of time and space in the present world. To become a true god king, you must have powerful power. But to have powerful power, Kronos can only rely on the power of the god king, which is basically a dead end. In the future, Zeus successfully broke the deadlock with Faith, but the second generation of god kings at this time did not have that condition. I'm going to start. Speaking softly, Themis no longer delayed. Everything is ready, she is already a little impatient. Hearing this, Kronos on the side quickly dodged. When the legislation begins, the rules of the entire present world will be gathered here. Except for the legislator himself, even the original god dare not face this endless chain of order at this time. After all, the so-called present world is actually the consciousness of chaos in the eyes of the gods. Including the law vision at the birth of the gods, it only occurs in the present world and does not affect other places. The truly complete chaos includes everything in the world, but the gods only touch its side that is more orderly. This part includes most of the sky, all the land, most of the ocean, and the core of the underworld. Outside the present world is the land of eternal night, the lightless realm, the bottomless abyss, the edge of the starry sky and the sea, and some dangerous places in the underworld. There, the chaotic part of chaos is dominant, and the power of the gods will even be weakened there. Only those who touch the great power cannot be affected by it. Seeing Kronos retreat, Themis pursed her lips. She took a step forward and stood at the highest point of the mountain. The next moment, the goddess of justice grasped the scepter of the king of gods, and the vast power on her body began to surge. It was not only the power of her medium power, but also the part of the king of gods temporarily given to her by the scepter. Under the dual effects of divine power and divine authority in the dark, a part of chaos instinct, the laws of the world began to open the door to the goddess under the guidance of the priesthood of law. Instantly, Themis seemed to see the chaotic source of power accumulated between the chains of order. It was a relic from the beginning of creation. They were not rare outside the present world. But in places dominated by order, their existence itself made the flow of laws seem much more difficult. So Themis raised her right hand. Silently, the brass-colored ancient book that looked like jade but not jade, like stone but not stone, opened its cover. New words began to appear on the book that originally engraved the calendar and the order of the spiritual world. As part of the agreement, she used spiritual text to write, so the part of the original spiritual text that was connected to the law was strengthened. The divine power in the body is becoming more and more intense. With the emergence of the handwriting on the code of creation, chains of laws appear from the void, rushing towards the artifact. In this process, not only does the chain of laws itself seem to be purified, but also a trace of invisible power emerges, which is quietly injected into the code, slowly increasing its power. This invisible power is of extremely high nature. With every additional trace, the breath of the artifact becomes stronger and more complete. Themis knows that this is the attributeless source power that chaos transformed from chaos. In addition to the code as a medium, this source power is also continuously poured into her body, turning into a part of the law priesthood. Although Themis's divine power has not increased, her upper limit has been opened. The road to powerful divine power has been paved by her. So under the gaze of Kronos and the secret observation of the Lord of the spirit world, the goddess of law held up the code and declared to the laws of the world, "I am the Lord of law granted by Chaos, the Titan god of old, the holder of the scepter of the God King and the writer of the code of creation. In the name of order, I am here to make a covenant for the present world." Chapter 38 Convergence. Unlike weak and weak divine powers, starting from medium divine power, the gods can initially contact the source sea of the world. The priesthood is the manifestation of the source power. Except for the world itself and the great divine power, no intelligent being can casually contact the source power itself, because this power that constitutes the essence of the world will only gradually assimilate their thinking with it. In the words of Ryan's previous life, it is transformation. So chaos created the priesthood and Ryan created the multifaceted crystal condensed by the source power. Only with a layer of separation can the gods exercise their authority freely. But just like a needle falling into the seawater, although the water cannot stop it, it is also difficult to cause damage to the water itself. When the divine power enters the medium divine power, the gods are no longer afraid of the source power, but can perceive its rhythm to a certain extent, and even use it to deepen their understanding of the corresponding origin. And it is this induction ability that allows them to vaguely sense that at this moment, on Mount Ovals, the laws of the world are converging and there are gods who are influencing the arrangement of the rules. Themis has been walking on the earth for thousands of years, and more than one god has witnessed her figure. The gods have long known what this goddess has done. But in their eyes, a being with medium divine power actually tried to modify the law, which is completely impossible. But now the shock from the source sea has forced them to change their minds. Perhaps this unknown Titan ancient god is not arrogant, but really has some special methods. And no matter what means Themis uses, the gods are very clear that with the completion of the laws of the world as the first promoter and executor, her divine position of law will inevitably be improved. There is no doubt that the powerful divine power is strong. Whether they are willing to admit it or not, the gods can only accept that another god who can influence the direction of the world is about to be born. It's Themis. She said last time that she would legislate for the world. I thought she was joking, but I didn't expect it to be true. On the sea, the goddess of the original water stood beside her husband and said with certainty, if she succeeds in legislating for the present world, the sublimated law priesthood will be enough to support her to reach the peak of powerful divine power. It seems that another strong man will emerge in our generation of titans. Hearing this, Oceanus nodded. The Ocean Lord was still happy to see his sister's promotion. Themis's priesthood destined that the other party would not interfere in the war between him and Pontus. After all, as sea gods, their disputes were natural. Let's go together to congratulate her. After looking for a while, Oceanus retracted his gaze. Legislating for the present world is not a matter of 1 or 2 days. Before it is completed, it will be enough for him to rush to Mount Odysseus. I haven't been back for a long time, and I don't know how much the current sacred mountain has changed from the original. In the underworld, beside Ether, the god of skylight, his brothers and sisters gathered around him. Unlike the gods on earth, the gods in the underworld are rare and weak. In addition to the powerful position of the goddess of daylight, only the god of destruction and the god of doom have the opportunity to enter the middle power in the future. In the eyes of outsiders, although they are not strong, They are backed by the two ancient gods of creation, and the gods have tacitly acknowledged their special status. But only they themselves know that the two original gods have never taken them seriously. Even the land of eternal night and the realm of no light keep a distance from them. It's not that they can't get in, but like other gods, even they themselves don't know whether they can get out after entering. Here, I warned you a long time ago not to cause trouble everywhere. The last time you went to the sacred mountain, Kronos didn't bother with you for the sake of your mother, but this is not a reason for you to act recklessly. No secret can be hidden forever. Sooner or later, they will know the truth of the matter. At that time, no one knows whether he will use us to establish the prestige of the God King. After all, compared with his Titan brothers, no one will stand up for us. Looking at his brother, even though he knew that Kyr was more or less affected by the priesthood, Ethel was still a little angry at him for not fighting. Really? If there is such a day, let him come to me. I think you will be fine. After all, aren't you going to show your loyalty to him? With a sneer, Kyr didn't appreciate it. As a descendant of the ancient god of creation, even if his nominal parents do not recognize his existence, he still thinks that he is equal to the ancient Titan gods. In fact, gods like him are not uncommon in chaos. The gods are immortal, but it does not mean that they are very smart. You minus. Aside, Ether pointed at his brother, but he didn't say anything in the end. Now, he completely understood why Hemera didn't want to be with them, because as she said, they were different. The light of day and the day, the priesthood itself determined that the two of them were incompatible with the other 6 gods. I will go to the sacred mountain to congratulate the Lord of Law. As for you, if you don't want to go, stay here. Shaking his head, Ether waved his sleeves and left. He should consider his sister's idea. Maybe compared to the underworld, the starry sky is where they should stay. Are we going there too, father? In the sky where Ether was thinking, the moon goddess Selene looked at Hyperion. Although she had been born for hundreds of years, she was still a weak god. Like all gods, she has a look that is difficult for mortals in later generations to achieve. Moreover, the gods of this era are not like those in later generations. She, a weak but beautiful god, is not worried about her situation. On the contrary, many gods have expressed their feelings to Selene, but she did not agree to any of them. Of course, Selene. Ryan shamelessly stole the concept of the moon and made you so weak. But when I tried to create a underworld in the underworld, I never succeeded once. I don't know how he did it, but as the god of justice and law, your aunt will make the decision for you. Selene was silent. She had heard about the god who lived in the underworld many times from her father. His seizure of the concept of moon originated from the agreement with the Earth Mother and the Titans. She did not think that her aunt would violate her priesthood for her father. Just thinking of her own power, she let it go. The current sun god family is different from the original. The eldest son and the eldest daughter both have weak divine power, but the originally weak goddess of dawn is stronger than her brothers and sisters. Helios is weak at least because he has no chance to move the sun and enhance his divine power, but his divine duties are still powerful. And Selene, she doesn't want to be weak forever. Maybe I can find a strong person to rely on. If my father didn't have a conflict with the king of gods, maybe he would be a good choice. Thinking silently in her heart, Selene and her father flew towards the center of the earth. At the same time, similar scenes were staged in many places. The higher the level of the god's divine power, the greater the gap between levels. A powerful divine power that is expected to be 18 or 9 levels will be a very important existence for chaos even in later generations. No matter what the idea is, no matter whether the relationship is friendly or not, the gods left their own temples and flew towards Mount Odysseus. So on this day, 1,500 years after the god-king calendar established by Kronos himself, the gods gather together. Chapter 39 Chaos Source. On the top of Mount Odos, the sun and the moon alternate in the sky, and the vibrations of the source sea become more and more intense. As time goes by, the number of gods around the sacred mountain gradually increases. Surrounding the sacred mountain, the positions of the gods are clearly divided. The ocean god system, the ancient sea god system, the mountain god system, and the star god system are divided into 4 directions and do not connect with each other. As for the other gods, they stand among them in a scattered manner, which can be regarded as easing the solemn atmosphere between the god systems. Among the 4 major god systems, the star god system is not in conflict with the world. They are located in the sky and worship the sun god as the main god. There is no conflict with other god systems. The only celestial god who may conflict is Kuz. He has only 2 children, and the star gods also treat him with courtesy. But the remaining 3 god systems are different. Indistinctly, the mountain god and the ancient sea god stand together to fight against the gods of the ocean system. The conflict between the 2 sea gods has a long history, and on Earth, because of the increase in river gods, lake gods, and spring gods, the contradictions between Oceanus and the mountain gods have also intensified. So the 2 brothers, Uriah and Pontus, joined hands to face the growing pantheon of their nephew. This is why, despite having 2 powerful gods, Oceanus has never really taken action against his uncle. This is not only because of the attitude of the Earth Mother, but more because of the existence of Uriah. Of course, there is also Kronos on the sacred mountain. Everyone knows that although the God King is forced to accept the current situation of the gods being independent, he will not accept it forever. If the gods go to war and let him seize this opportunity, he will definitely do something. The main gods of the several pantheons know this well. In the slightly tense atmosphere of the gods, more than 3 months passed in a flash. The perfection of the code is gradually coming to an end. Around the goddess of law, the chain of laws gathers as visible to the naked eye, and is closely connected with the code of creation with a deeper and deeper breath. With her fingertips as brush strokes and the source power as ink, Themis wrote her achievements of thousands of years at will under the gaze of the gods of chaos. At a certain moment when she wrote the last character, time and space seemed to freeze for a moment. The surroundings of the sacred mountain immediately fell into a strange calm, and only the pulling sound of the law chain remained the same. In this special atmosphere, Themis was not affected. The law has been written, and there is only one step left. She pressed her hand on the pages of the brass book, and this artifact, which had become as tall as a person at some point, flashed as if responding to the will of the goddess of law. Themis could feel that at this moment, she was infinitely close to the source sea. Every word she said could be heard by the world. In the name of the supreme law of order under the witness of chaos, I hereby sign a contract with the world. Every 100 days of life, it will be established as a law. It will take effect now and will be the same for all eternity. The voice was very light, but when it really spread, chaos's existence seemed to shake with it. Immediately, the chain of order around Themis began to ring in an orderly manner, and gray mists from light to dark emerged from the law. The mists gathered and dispersed unpredictably, and finally formed a snake shape. They wandered around the code of creation and hissed and howled at it. The gods couldn't help but feel it in their hearts. That was the remaining chaotic source power in the world, a tumor left over from the beginning of creation. They were the placenta that gave birth to Tartarus, and they were also the core of those places outside the world that stopped the gods. The chaotic source power left here was less than 1 or 2% of the initial one, but it was enough to make any god afraid. Chaos is naturally hostile to order, so they surrounded the code of creation, but the difference in power made them instinctively stop. After all, the complete artifact of the Trinity is a creation that is truly equal to the great divine power. Even if it is not yet perfect, it is not something that these remaining chaotic source powers can resist. As time passed, the number of fog snakes around gradually increased. When the last bit of gray mist overflowed, the chain of laws returned to calm. There was no extravagance, and there was no sudden surge in power, but everyone knew that the legislation had been successful. The origin of Themis's priesthood, like Kronos' position as the king of gods, had gradually increased in the past 100 days. All the gods could feel that although the power of the gods had not increased, the goddess of justice had opened the door to powerful divine power. The rest was just the accumulation of time. Congratulations, my sister, the gods should remember your feat. Around the sacred mountain, Oceanus was the first to congratulate. Although he did not dare to approach the sacred mountain due to the wandering mist snakes, his loud voice still spread far away. Congratulations, Your Highness Themis. Congratulations, it is my honor to witness your great deeds. Congratulations, your deeds today will surely be passed down forever in chaos. The voice of the Lord of the Ocean seemed to remind the gods present, and congratulations rang out one after another. On the top of the sacred mountain, Themis was very tired, but she still pulled herself together and greeted the gods. After 1,000 years of hard work, she finally succeeded. Feeling the increase in the source of her divine duties, Themis smiled even at the few underworld gods she had always disliked. Deception, lust and other divine duties were naturally in conflict with law, but since they were brought by the god of skylight and the goddess of daylight, Lady Justice reluctantly accepted their reluctant congratulations. But in her impression, there should be more than 5 gods in the underworld, and she didn't know what delayed the rest. The gods kept congratulating them, But Timus soon realized their embarrassing situation. After the legislation was over, the gods were supposed to come to the sacred mountain, but due to the existence of the source of chaos here, including Kronos, they could only stand far away and dared not get close. Timus had no solution to this. She signaled Kronos with her eyes and prepared to invite the gods to the temple behind Mount Odysseus, where the celebration banquet had been prepared. "Congratulations, Ms. Timus." Just as she was about to speak, a familiar voice came. The goddess of justice turned around with some surprise. She thought that the other party would wait until the gods dispersed before coming. As far as her eyes could see, space fluctuations came, and a young god in black appeared silently in front of her as if the source of chaos posed no threat to him. Several powerful gods in the distance frowned. With their power, they only noticed the arrival a little earlier. They had only seen this level of space-time power in Kronos. "It should be congratulations, Your Highness Ryan." With a slight smile, the goddess breathed a sigh of relief and pointed to the code of creation beside her. "It's overdue for 200 years, it's time to return it to its original owner. And these chaotic sources, if you don't come again, I don't know how to deal with them." Hearing this, many gods around who had never seen Ryan were curious about his identity and what his relationship was with the artifact of the goddess of law. The few who recognized Ryan's existence were also puzzled. Chaotic source power is simply a poison for the gods born in the present world. Ignoring the gods beside him, Ryan nodded to Timus. He stretched out his hand and waved, and the code of creation immediately shrank and turned into a normal book size and fell into his palm. His fingers tapped the spine of the book and a page fell from the artifact. A golden light flashed on the page and the surrounding fog snakes immediately flowed into it like a whale sucking water, leaving no trace. Obviously, in the hands of the real owner of the artifact, it showed a stronger power in the field of order. "Do you want to stay for my celebration party?" "No, I'm just here to take away the things you can't handle. I've been looking forward to the chaos source for a long time." Shaking his head, Ryan rejected Timus' invitation. He had no interest in attending the banquet of this era. After getting the things, Ryan was ready to say goodbye. But the next moment, an inexplicable sense of oppression came instantly, causing the surrounding space to solidify. This degree of confinement actually did not affect him much. As long as he used a little more force, Ryan could easily break it. But he didn't do that. He just turned slightly and looked at the source of power. As expected, the sun god family stood there in his sight. The leader was the lord of the sun, Hyperion. Chapter 40 Judgment. As the sun god's undisguised divine power fluctuated, the originally lively atmosphere inside and outside the sacred mountain became solemn. The gods who were about to step forward also stopped. Although the fog snake was cleared, they were also unwilling to get involved in the obvious conflict in front of them. The character and ambition of the sun god are well known, and he has never been a sociable god. Except for his wife Thea, even his children are more afraid of him than respect him, and the gods naturally will not speak for him. As for Ryan, it goes without saying that among the gods who knew him, most of them, except Timus, were happy to see someone take action against him. This god who is suspected to be older than the original god has never really taken action. Although fate also makes the gods afraid, it is not powerful enough. Now someone is willing to be the first to test Ryan's strength. Even the ancient mountain god Uriah can't help but want to watch the show. What's the matter? Under the gaze of the gods, facing the faint pressure of Hyperion's divine power, Ryan asked slowly. Ryan's attitude was revealed in his calm tone and expression. He didn't take the sun god seriously at all, at least it seemed so. "Minus, you know what I'm here for, Ryan. I went to the underworld to find you, but you didn't even dare to see me." With his eyes narrowed, Hyperion responded to Ryan's indifference with a stronger divine pressure. Light and heat emerged around Ryan and rushed towards him. But soon he found that although his divine power continued to surge, they all disappeared at the edge of Ryan's clothes. No, it didn't disappear. Hyperion could feel that the power of the sun was still there and continued to move forward. It was only a short distance of 1 finger wide, but it seemed to be stretched tens of millions of times. No matter how close his power was, it was always almost away from the other party. Faced with such a situation, the sun god glanced at the watching god king with his peripheral vision. This method was very similar to the application of spatial authority, but in his impression, Kronos was the god of time and space. But it doesn't matter anymore. When the power of both sides was transferred, Ryan's medium power was very obvious to him. There was some threat, but that was all. This made Hyperion's determination a little firmer. Ryan, you should know my purpose very well. Thousands of years ago, you used rhetoric to confuse the God King and demanded 3 conditions, thus shamelessly stealing the concept of moon today. I came to correct this mistake. In front of the gods, Hyperion still had to talk about some reason. Although the Titans who really experienced that period of time knew that he was the one who agreed at that time. The sun god was very happy that Pluto could expand his authority, and he didn't know that the future moon would become his daughter before he was free. But obviously, Pluto didn't appear for a long time, and Selene was born, and Hyperion's thoughts changed accordingly. On the other hand, facing the questioning of the sun god, Ryan was unmoved. Since the last time the other party went to the underworld, he had more or less expected this day. The other party wanted the moon in his hand, so why didn't he want a chicken to intimidate the gods? If it were any other Titan with the difference in divine power level, Ryan might not have any good solution, but Hyperion chose to attack at this time and place, which could only be said to be the root of disaster for himself. Feeling the worldly laws that had not yet completely dissipated around him, Ryan did not reply, but turned to look at Kronos. Is this what you mean? The God King on the side was stunned at first, and then decisively denied. No, this matter has nothing to do with me. The promise of the God King is never discounted. Although he wanted to say yes, and then take Ryan down with Hyperion to see if he could get his own origin of time and space back. But after thinking about it, Kronos gave up the idea. Now that Hyperion has taken the initiative to jump out, he can completely decide based on the subsequent situation. If Ryan was not as terrible as he thought, he believed that his queen would definitely disobey the order of the King of Gods and take the initiative to do something that would make Kronos feel regretful. But if Ryan solved the problem brought by the sun god, he would never act rashly. Ryan. With a low roar, the sun god who was ignored by Ryan on the side was angry again. He thought of many reactions of the other party, such as refusing to hand over the concept of moon and leaving directly in some way, or telling the gods about the previous agreement and prophecy and criticizing his fickleness, but Hyperion did not expect that the other party simply ignored his existence. He wanted to take action directly, but the previous unsuccessful attempt still made the sun god barely regain some reason. He calmed down and turned his head to look at Creus, the god of weather. The result made him relieved, and this relative gave him an affirmative look. Creus was more or less dissatisfied with Ryan because of the calendar. He didn't take the initiative to make trouble, but he dared to assist. Goddess of justice, my sister Themis, this greedy god first stole Mnemosyne's memories and then conspired to seize my daughter's moon. I hope you can make a fair judgment and make him pay for his evil deeds. Having a helper was not enough for Hyperion. He tried to get Themis to stand on his side. But obviously, the result was not what he expected. Gods and priesthoods influence each other, at least the native gods of chaos are like this. Except for the former Father in heaven, no one has made the Lord of justice and law go against his instincts. Moreover, even from a personal emotional point of view, Themis would not hesitate for a moment between the friend who lent the artifact and the sun god who had not seen each other for thousands of years. The god of spirituality was born before us, and the ownership of memory was decided by chaos. As for moon, it was an agreement witnessed by the mother goddess and us. Shaking her head, Themis had no intention of showing favoritism for her brother. She turned her head and glanced at Ryan. If the other party needed her help, she didn't mind standing on the side of justice. She might not be the opponent of the sun god as her divine power had not yet broken through, but she was sure to stop via agreement. He just threatened us with a prophecy. With a sneer, Hyperion seemed to have forgotten how humble and embarrassed he was when the Father in heaven was still there. As the leader of the star god family, he had long lost his past cautiousness. Since you are unwilling to help me, my sister, then you'd better not stop me. Even if your priesthood has been promoted, you are still not my opponent now. And you, Ryan, Hyperion sneered and looked over. He was not going to endure it anymore. In front of the gods, I will tell you that power is far more effective than words. The next moment, the sky became brighter. Chapter 41 The Power of the Creation Code. After the words fell, Hyperion no longer hesitated. Vast divine power emerged from him, echoing with the celestial bodies in the starry sky. Now that he had made a decision, he did not intend to test it anymore. The sun in the sky suddenly burst out thousands of times the heat. All intelligent creatures in chaos could see that the sun, which was originally hanging in the middle of the sky, began to deviate from its original position and fell towards the earth from slow to fast. As the original sun god, a powerful titan god, Hyperion did not need any sun god chariot to drive this celestial body. In other words, using external objects to control the symbol of one's own priesthood is itself a manifestation of insufficient strength. At the same time, the ancient titan gods Thea and Creus also secretly used their power. Although they did not take action directly, light and sun were too compatible, and weather could also increase the power of the sun. The sun's light became thousands of times more blazing, and it followed the traction of divine power and crashed straight into Ryan. With the power of one blow, under the combined efforts of the three titans, Hyperion's power rose by more than one level. Even the several powerful gods present could not help but show a solemn look. Although Hyperion's power fell back to the threshold of powerful power due to the birth of his eldest son, the attack of the great sun was enough to make any god here retreat. "You still have time to give up now," Hyperion finally laughed at Ryan on the sacred mountain. "When the sun sets, you will have no chance to regret it." With a raised eyebrow, Ryan had to admit that Thea and the sun god were indeed a natural match. With the combined efforts of the two, they were already close to the level of divine power level 19. If Hyperion had not dug his own grave, Ryan would really not dare to stay where he was. Of course, not being able to take it does not mean that it cannot be avoided. The great sun has locked this space vaguely, but it does not have the authority of time and space after all. As long as he bypasses history and travels through time and space, Ryan can retreat calmly at any time. But compared to avoiding, he has a better solution. Nothing is absolute, Hyperion. Gods always have to pay the price for what they have done. Uranus is like this, and you are no exception. The lessons of history are right in front of us, but you have never learned anything. Ryan responded calmly, shaking his head slightly. The next moment, the light around him was instantly distorted. Under the influence of authority, 1 second was stretched to more than a moment. This is just the basic application of the power of time. With enough time, he slowly raised his hand and the code of creation floated in the air and turned the pages. In a blink of an eye, countless pages filled with spiritual texts turned over, and finally, it stopped at the part that recorded the rules of celestial movement. Everything has its order. Even if the God King abuses his authority, he will be punished by the world, let alone a sun god. And holding the code of creation, Ryan can make this punishment more specific, more severe, and more efficient. The sun falling to the earth is not a big deal. As long as Hyperion controls it properly and does not let it really hit the earth, the backlash he needs to bear is almost zero. But the sun god suppressed his eldest son for hundreds of years, allowing the celestial body that should rise in the east and set in the west to hang in the air. This is his biggest violation of order. And on this sacred mountain that has just completed the legislation, the remaining worldly laws will increase the power of the creation code and make those who deviate from order receive double punishment. The movement of the sun and the moon has its rules. According to the code, each one follows its own way. As the voice fell, Ryan's divine power flowed into the book in his hand and was absorbed by this powerful creation that was close to the creation artifact. The next moment, a crisp sound of chains shaking came from the void, and the speed of the sun that was originally colliding with Ryan suddenly slowed down, completely losing its initial momentum. As the sun god, Hyperion also found that as the sun deviated more from its original orbit, there was a stronger force to prevent it from moving. Although the sun was still approaching Ryan, the power of this attack had been reduced by half. Fee, just a trick. With a cold snort, Hyperion glanced at the Mother of Light beside him. Thea understood what he meant, and the two began to use their divine power at the same time, and the speed of the sun's descent accelerated again. If Ryan was also a powerful divine power, or had a complete artifact of creation in his hand, Hyperion would definitely turn around and leave. But now, even if he had to use nearly half of his power to fight against the chain of laws, he still had enough confidence. However, until this moment, he had not realized the seriousness of the problem. Violators are guilty. Those who are guilty should be punished. Accompanied by Ryan's second verdict, Hyperion first didn't care, and then his face suddenly changed. He had already prepared to resist the power of order again, but just now, he was horrified to find that his control over the sun was actually declining. Except chaos, no one could shake the authority of God, and Hyperion thought he had hallucinations. But then, he suddenly realized the problem. Is it Helios? What did you do to him? Exclaiming, Hyperion realized that it was not chaos who was reducing his divine power, but that there was something wrong with the sun. Since the birth of Helios, the sun has had two masters, one symbolizing its existence and the other symbolizing its operation. But because of the oppression of the eldest son, the sun has not really operated since the day of its birth. Undoubtedly, this is a violation of the order of the world. But under normal circumstances, as the original sun, a few hundred years is far from enough for Hyperion to pay the price for this, but under the effect of the code of creation, the feedback of order is amplified. Hyperion's control over the sun began to flow to his children. Although this transfer is reversible, he was forced to stop the sun from falling. He can continue to attack as long as he has enough trust in Helios. But it is obvious that there is no trust between the father and son of the sun god. Although Helios always obeys him on weekdays, think about it and you will know that Hyperion does not believe this at all. For the sun god who has personally performed the fatherly love and filial piety, the daughter is fine. After all, there is no conflict in the priesthood. But for his son Helios, he has long been prepared. Okay, very good, Themis, is this your justice? Knowing that he can only return empty-handed today, Hyperion glared at his sister beside him. Since the oracle slate was reshaped, it is completely different from the original. Even the ancient gods who had seen the oracle on the sacred mountain did not recognize that the code of creation was the stone tablet. This originally belonged to His Highness Ryan. I just returned it to its original owner. Frowning, Themis still explained. With his relationship with us Titans, would he be kind enough to lend you the artifact? With a cold snort, Hyperion was not blinded by anger. He took a last look at Ryan and turned away. Now, no matter how many harsh words he said, it would only become a joke, but today's matter is not over. Looking at Hyperion who was going away, Ryan shook his head slightly. He could probably guess what the other party was thinking. But unfortunately, you can decide when to start, when to end. I have the final say. So the next moment, he reached out and took out a gift that had been there for 1,500 years. Chapter 42 Sun Devourer. 500 years ago, Uranus lost his position as the king of gods, and Ryan also opened up the spirit world on that day. At the same time, the two gods of the dark night were inspired by the world, but in the end, not only did they not conflict with Ryan, but after he sent out his soul embryo, each of them returned a gift. Nyx hung a star for Ryan, and Erebus gave Ryan the negative emotions when Uranus lost his position. That was the hatred of the father for the son, and the murderous intention of the king for the rebellion. Ryan originally planned to mix it with other materials in the future and make it into a divine weapon specializing in the 12 titans, but later, he had some new ideas. Targeting 12 gods, how can it be as powerful as targeting one god? The left hand lightly touched the code of creation, and the invisible order was rewritten. At this time, the sun in the sky had not returned to its position, and the punishment of Hyperion by the order was still maintained. So Ryan mobilized his divine power and cleverly changed the way of punishment. The sun god in midair suddenly felt a shadow cast in his heart. He looked around suspiciously, but found nothing. The next moment, standing in the distorted time, Ryan drew the source power of the spirit world and slowly injected it into the changing black air in his hand. The chaotic source power just obtained also quickly transformed a little, mixed with the negative emotions. Time passed slowly, and the creation entangled with source power and emotions in front of him had begun to take shape. It inherited its previous true form like a vague mist. The mark that once belonged to Uranus was washed away, and only the hatred against the Titans was retained. Not surprisingly, it would never be possible for it to have normal reason when it was in direct contact with the source. But Ryan didn't care. It was just a weapon, it didn't need reason, as long as it was easy to use. After looking at it for a while, Ryan finally gave the object in his hand a new life in the name of the Lord of Spirituality. Eclipse, the indescribable evil spirit of the spirit world, the uncertain mist that devours light and heat, I give you life in the name of the Creator. After the words fell, the black mist in front of him trembled first, and then became agile. Although the evil spirit still had no reason, it gave birth to the instinct of chaos. The next moment, the newly born Eclipse seemed to sense the Creator's thoughts, so it instantly merged into the surrounding space and rushed towards the distant celestial body. The God King's murderous intent was originally sent to the 12 Titans, but when it was reshaped, Ryan concentrated it on the sun represented by Hyperion. When the range was reduced, this power became more targeted and restrained. And this kind of created life is different from the gods. They do not need to grow, and their birth is the peak. After mixing with other powers, this emotion that Ryan originally believed to be capable of creating creatures comparable to true gods went a step further and directly became an evil thing close to medium divine power. Facing the sun, its power is even more powerful. It seemed like a long time had passed, but in fact, in the distorted time, only a few seconds had passed in the outside world. So the gods on Mount Odysseus just saw Hyperion leaving in a panic, and the next moment, the sky darkened. Hyperion, who had never seen an evil thing, was in a trance, and the black fog had already circled in front of him. The newborn evil spirit spread out its illusory body and wrapped the originally huge light body in it. So the light of the sun was covered, and chaos fell into darkness for the first time outside the night. What is it? No, stop it. He was startled at first, and then the tall and heroic sun god showed a fearful expression for the first time. When the evil spirit originated from the emotions of the previous god king covered the sun, he suddenly felt that the power of the sun was really weakened. This was not the previous transfer, nor was it a temporary change. Hyperion clearly felt that part of the origin of the sun was being transformed into a power that was opposite to it. That power seemed to be born to hate light and wanted to pull the world into eternal night. Even at this moment, the divine power that he had finally stabilized after the birth of his eldest son began to falter. If the source power of the sun continued to flow, he might not be able to maintain his own strength. Get out of here. Boom. In fear, Hyperion no longer cared whether he would be hurt. He mobilized his divine power and punched the sun. The black fog covering the surface of the sun was dispersed by a blow, and a little light leaked out, but before he could breathe a sigh of relief, the black fog covered it again in a blink of an eye. Hyperion's attack cannot be said to be ineffective, but the evil creature that directly merged with the source power itself also gained incredible immortality at the expense of reason. Even if the power gap is huge, it is difficult to be directly defeated. Thea, help me. Listening to her husband's somewhat panicked call, although the Mother of Light could not clearly feel the change of the source power of the sun like the sun god, she still did not hesitate to attack together. The black fog wrapped around the sun expanded for a moment. It was the light inspired by the goddess. But in a flash, the black fog returned to normal. The light inspired by Thea failed to penetrate its body, but was turned into food by the evil spirit. Obviously, the sun god couple, who encountered the evil creature for the first time, did not know the correct way to deal with it. The simple bombardment of divine power was just a massage for the other party. At the same time, as Hyperion made a full effort, the shaking of his divine power was also noticed by the gods watching. The second and third generation Titans only had some vague feelings, but the first generation Titans were different. As early as when Ryan took out that emotion, they already felt something was wrong. Now that the sun god's priesthood is shaking, they have completely changed their faces. Thesis, did you feel it just now? I felt it. I'm not sure, but it gave me a feeling of facing the Father God. Responding to her husband's words in a deep voice, the goddess of water clenched her fists. Thousands of years have passed and she thought she had forgotten the past, but when the familiar breath came, she still couldn't control her emotions. Titan, a synonym for cowards. In order to separate from the past, they changed this word to Titan, and used it to express courage and strength. But it turns out that in front of the Father, they are no different from thousands of years ago. It's not him, at most it's just some of the power he left behind. Unlike her brothers and sisters, the goddess of light, Phoebe, looked much more dignified. Phoebe has always paid attention to decency and longed for the respect and compliments of others, but even she herself didn't notice that her voice was shaking a little. Whether it was the two gods who controlled the ocean, her husband, the god of the celestial body, or even Hyperion who was madly attacking the sun in the sky, they were all powerful gods, but Phoebe was different. If the Mother of Light failed to be promoted because of the slow accumulation of divine power, then her priesthood was simply limited. Perhaps in the original trajectory, Phoebe once held the oracle and obtained enlightenment through it, taking that crucial step. But now, she probably doesn't have this opportunity. Some power. If it was just like this, I wouldn't be too worried, but he can actually turn these powers into that kind of special life. Innate restraint, even though the power gap is so huge, it can make Hyperion helpless. It's really a terrible creation. On the side, the taciturn Lord of the Mountains pointed out the key to the problem. I hope this is unrepeatable. Pontos's face was also a little gloomy. Unlike his brother who had nothing to do with it, he personally hid Uranus' organs in the seabed at that time. He didn't know whether there was only one power against the 12 Titans, but whether there was one against him was the real concern of the ancient sea god. A silent sense of oppression spread among the gods. It was the first time they heard of a creation that could shake the origin of the priesthood. Chapter 43 Ending. Your Highness Ryan. On the sacred mountain, Rhea, who had been accompanying the god king, suddenly spoke. The god's eyes were attracted to her. The goddess of time spoke at this time, obviously not only representing herself, but also expressing the will of the God King. Your Highness Ryan, your creation frightens me, but the earth cannot live without the sun, just as the underworld cannot live without the shining of the moon. If the day loses its light from now on, all things in the world will become desolate. The collision in the sky continued, and the power of the sun god became more and more fluctuating. If it was just Hyperion himself who was weak, Rhea didn't want to say anything. Her words were obviously exaggerated, but feeling the turmoil of the great Japanese origin, the Queen of Gods knew very well that the world under Kronos' rule lacked a celestial body, which was absolutely unacceptable to him. The sun god can pay the price, but the sun cannot be in trouble. Ryan did not comment on the Queen of Gods' proposal. Looking at the God King and his wife with a slightly changed expression, he still did not insist to the end. Not to mention that he actually doesn't have the ability to destroy the sun. Even if he does, he can't think of any benefit from doing so. Hyperion should be punished for his arrogance, but you are right, chaos really can't live without this celestial body. So under the witness of the gods, I can reluctantly make some concessions. If Hyperion is willing to apologize to me and swear to give up control of the sun for 500 years and let his own son run it for him, then I can forgive his behavior. With a twitch of his mouth, Kronos next to him didn't know what to say about Ryan's concession. Not forever, just 500 years, it seems very broad, but the God King doesn't even have to think about it. After experiencing true freedom, Helios will never be willing to continue to accept his father's control. Maybe a father-son fratricide will be staged in the future, but it has nothing to do with the God King. In fact, in his heart, Kronos is quite happy to see this scene happen. In the past, the God King ordered not to leave the God Mountain, but if he could take over the starry sky, he would have his own territory that he could control. Respected sun god, I think you have heard it too. Now that he got the answer, the God King no longer hesitated. He looked up at the sky and said to Hyperion, as the Lord of the Spirit World said, you should pay the price for your actions. The movement of celestial bodies has its own theorem. Rising in the east and setting in the west is the trajectory of the sun now. It is time for my nephew to take charge of the starry sky with you. After the voice fell, the gods present also looked up at the sky. If Ryan insisted on destroying the sun, even if they were not close to Hyperion, they could not sit idly by and watch this happen. But if it was just a family dispute involving the sun god, that would be another matter. In the sky, listening to the sound coming from the earth, Hyperion punched out unwillingly. But looking at the torn and closed eclipse, he finally succumbed. He didn't know if this monster had a limit to the transformation of the origin of the sun, but if it continued like this, he would probably become the second god of chaos who fell from his own powerful power. Stopping the attack, Hyperion took a deep breath. He was silent for a while, trying to force a smile on his face, but he didn't succeed after all. Yes, you are right. Your Highness Ryan, I apologize for my previous behavior. You have undisputed sovereignty over the moon. This is the agreement witnessed by the Mother Goddess and us. Nodding, looking at the stiff face of the sun god, Ryan still didn't say anything. Hyperion's cheek twitched. He knew what the other party wanted, so he looked at Ryan and said word by word. I swear to the sticks that in the next 500 years, my eldest son will run the sun for me. This is the punishment I deserve. The next moment, a wave of law descended here. This was the spontaneous feedback from the Styx priesthood far away in the underworld. She witnessed the oath of the sun god. Very good. Seeing this, Ryan was finally satisfied. Come back, Eclipse. He waved in the direction of the sun and called his creation. Although the evil spirit's consciousness was chaotic and disordered, it still couldn't resist the call of the creator. When it left the sun as an immortal spirit, it directly disintegrated its form and returned to Ryan in a scattered state. The darkness ended and the sun shone on the earth again. Everything seemed to be the same, and everything seemed to have changed. This is just a lesson. In the sun, Ryan closed the code of creation, smiled and glanced at the gods, and then looked at the embarrassed figure in the sky. But if there is a next time, it will be more than a lesson. His face turned black, but seeing the black fog wandering around Ryan, Hyperion didn't say a word after all. He turned and left, followed by Thea and Selene, who had been silent throughout the whole process. The young moon goddess seemed a little frightened. She had thought that her father's trip would not succeed, but she didn't expect the ending to be like this. She looked at her Aunt Phoebe out of the corner of her eye. The Titan's priesthood was also not strong, but her husband, Kus, as the god of the lightless celestial body, even touched a little bit of the dark realm. Even among the powerful gods, his power was by no means ordinary. The moon god once again had some ideas, but unfortunately, she thought about all the gods of chaos and couldn't think of any powerful god who had a close relationship with her father. The sun god and his family left, and the expressions of the gods around the sacred mountain were different. There are those who are worried, those who are panic, those who ignore, those who revere, and those who are afraid. But the same thing is that they all silently put Ryan in the category of people who cannot be provoked. Although they know very well that the behavior of eroding the origin of the priesthood is not as easy as Ryan shows, no one wants to experience this kind of thing personally. Ryan, who is under the attention of the gods, feels the priesthood of solar eclipse on the evil spirit, and his mood can't help but be a little happy. It's not that he didn't want Chaos's first solar eclipse to last longer, so long that Hyperion's power completely fell, but Ryan knew that if it continued, it would be easy for the other party to see some clues. The origin of Sun was indeed shaken, but it was actually Chaos will that personally handled it. Eclipse is regarded by the world as a new god born from the emotions of the previous god king, and solar eclipse is its priesthood. So the previous loss of the origin is actually more similar to the priesthood split when the new god was born, but Ryan used the artifact to affect the manifestation of this process. If we really want to compare the power, even if there is a restraint relationship, it is difficult for the evil spirit to cross two levels of divine power and truly threaten the sun god. However, after this time, when the concept of solar eclipse it seized is taken over, absorbed, and digested by the spirit world, it will be re-integrated with Eclipse. With the power of medium divine power and double restraint buff, it is the real sun nemesis. Since the farce is over, I won't bother you anymore. I'm sorry to interrupt your celebration. Ryan said the latter sentence to the goddess of law. Themis shook her head when she heard it, and she didn't care about these things. Seeing Ryan ready to leave, the gods present, no matter what they thought in their hearts, greeted him one by one. Ryan nodded in response, and then the power of space emerged and his body gradually became empty. Before leaving, Ryan glanced at the god of weather on the sacred mountain. Thea was on her husband, which was understandable, but he saw Creus's behavior of mobilizing divine power to help. However, he has done enough today, and there will be a more suitable person to punish him in the future. Ryan left, and as the two protagonists of the previous conflict left one after another, the atmosphere in the field also eased. Today's scene made many new gods present recognize this ancient existence who lived in the underworld. Even the first generation of Titans had different thoughts at this moment. Oceanus couldn't help but start thinking whether he had a chance to make Ryan his relative. And Creus was already regretting that he shouldn't have helped just now. As for Kronos, this god king had no other performance except to mediate in the middle, as if everything was within his expectations. But as Ryan said, the farce was over, so he didn't remain silent. Everyone, the god king said loudly, it was just an accident before. Now that the problem has been solved, please move to my palace and enjoy the feast I prepared for you. Although there was a small incident in this celebration banquet for the successful legislation for the god king, both sides of the conflict are not good people, and he is happy whoever loses. Now, of course, it is time for the banquet to officially begin. Chapter 44 Evil Thing. Half a day later, Ryan returned to the core of the spirit world. The Sinea mountain was as peaceful as usual. Except for Ryan and the first generation of spirit angels he created, basically no life could get close to here. The 7 crescent moons cast moonlight, and the place was somewhat similar to the land of eternal night. The domain of Lady Night is different from that of the Lord of Darkness. Eternal night does not mean that there is no light. Evil spirits, it is more appropriate to call them evil things. Although it is just a pure spirit, this construction method that is directly combined with the source of power seems to be used not only on spirits. After dismissing Lyanna who came to greet him, Ryan sat in the Temple of Eras, looking at the invisible and erratic eclipse, and was a little surprised. This kind of creation with powerful power and quick completion is really useful. Other gods cannot do this, because the existence that directly merges with the source of power has no wisdom and their thoughts are completely chaotic and crazy. Even the masters who created them find it difficult to control their behavior. But Ryan is different. As the actual master of the source power and the pioneer of the spiritual world, he can use other methods to control these lives. Gaia in later generations once gave birth to Typhon to express dissatisfaction with Zeus and declare power. Maybe at that time, I can also put 2 ancient evil things on Mount Olympus to see how this god king who spread seeds all over the world will deal with it. Lightly tapping the armrest of the chair, Ryan was very satisfied with his creation. It takes time to cultivate gods. Even if there are powerful priests, there must be enough potential to carry and sufficient time to accumulate divine power. But this kind of evil thing is born strong. They are like the 100-armed giants, and they are at their peak when they are born. The only drawback is that, perhaps because of the fusion of the source of chaos, although Eclipse has become stronger, it is also faintly rejected by the laws of the world. The source of chaos is originally a miscellaneous thing that was squeezed out by the order of the world after the legislation. Even if it is integrated with other things now, it is still disliked by the world. It can be said that this kind of evil thing can only stay in the outside world for a short time from now on, or isolate the law from its induction by some means. Otherwise, the longer they stay in the world, the stronger the suppression of the interface will be. There are only a few exceptions, such as the edge of the underworld, the end of the ocean and the sky, and the domain of the three primitive gods. Those areas, like the spiritual world, are not included in the control of the world, and Eclipse will naturally not be affected. The ancient evil creatures in the spiritual world, the nameless ones wandering between reality and illusion, this is really getting more and more interesting. I don't know if future humans will regard the depths of the spiritual world as a terrifying forbidden land where evil gods run all over the ground. Smiling and shaking his head, Ryan still feels a little bit of anticipation for this. Cutting open the space, Ryan threw Eclipse to the 5th level of the spiritual world. For this kind of spiritual life with power comparable to that of the true God, if it has wisdom and reason, it can naturally wander freely in the 7 levels of the spiritual world, but Eclipse is obviously not among them. Compared with ordinary life, it prefers to stay in the chaotic and disordered deep spiritual world. Because for them, the shallow spiritual world of the 1st and 2nd levels is a bit small. This smallness is not in terms of space, but in terms of spiritual concepts. When in the shallow spiritual world, the evil creatures that cannot restrain their power like the true gods will have an instinctive sense of being bound, and their existence itself is an unstoppable disaster for non-god spiritual life. So unless necessary, Ryan does not intend to let it move freely. Let it stay in the 5th or 6th level of the spiritual world. For the unintelligent Eclipse, even if it wanders for 10,000 years, it may just be spinning in place because it cannot understand the chaotic time and space of the deep spiritual world. After dealing with the newly created evil creatures, Ryan took out the code of creation. Compared with before, the brass-colored ancient book has obviously added a lot of patterns, which is the manifestation of the rules of the present world. The thickness of the book has not changed, but Ryan knows that its number of pages has increased by about 1/3. After this legislation, the components of this creation artifact have been completely perfected. From now on, it no longer needs to stay in the source power pool of the spirit world, but can serve as one of the cores of the spirit world, helping Ryan to sort out the rules and integrate the source power. This artifact alone is enough to make the rules and order of the spirit world more than 30% stronger than the original level. Externally, the speed of the extension of the spirit world has greatly accelerated. Internally, when other lives enter the spirit world without permission, the interface's suppression of them has also increased. It can be said that Ryan does not need to take action for existences below the medium divine power, and can easily suppress them with the chain of laws of the spirit world itself. That is to say, the code of creation is not an offensive artifact. Its power is more inclined to assistance rather than direct combat. Otherwise, even if Hyperion, whose divine power has fallen to level 16, has the assistance of the Mother of Light, I can completely suppress him head-on, so why do I need to spend all this effort? Shaking his head, Ryan knew that the key to the problem was that he was busy integrating the source power, increasing the size of the spirit world and the upper limit of the priesthood, and had no time to accumulate divine power. This time, Hyperion was forced to surrender because of the right time, right place, and right people. Otherwise, with his current divine power level of 12, it would have been difficult for him to win with just an auxiliary artifact. The level of divine power of gods increases as they advance. Below the medium divine power, the type of authority and the number of gods are the key to victory. 2 or 3 true gods with weak divine power can defeat a weak divine power. A priesthood that is biased towards fighting can make gods, like the protagonists of fantasy novels, fighting beyond their level and fighting against many. But in the realm of powerful divine power, basically a difference of 2 levels of divine power can still gain the upper hand against 2. And the gods who can reach this step basically have no weak priesthood. After absorbing Chaos's fire source power, I wonder if I can breed a divine weapon that specializes in fighting. Zeus has a thunder, Kronos has his sickle, and I should have a killing weapon of my own. It's just that the power of fire is indeed a bit huge. I hope I can fully absorb the relevant concepts before Kronos' eldest daughter is born. With a sigh, Ryan continued to devote himself to the great cause of digesting the source power. Zeus is the most comfortable being a god. He is either abusing his power or looking for a princess/queen/goddess. Unlike him, he has not had a few days of free time since he opened up the spirit world. However, sighing aside, it is obviously not the time for Ryan to relax. When the gods related to chaos are born one after another, unless there are gods as easy to deceive as Kronos, he will not be able to fleece the world as unscrupulously as he is now. It is not as simple to rely on the operation of the spirit world to enhance the origin as to rob it directly. So before this, Ryan naturally rob as much as I can. Chapter 45 Theory of Creation. The site returned to Mount Ovals. When Ryan returned to the spirit world, the banquet officially began. In the past, for various reasons, the gods of chaos rarely gathered together. But taking advantage of this rare event, some of the originally conflicting gods also put aside their disputes and sat in the same temple. Perhaps because they can often learn some new knowledge, the Mountain of Gods has been a trendsetter in the past 1,000 years. Whether they like Kronos, the king of gods, or not, the gods of chaos really enjoy his hospitality. In a blink of an eye, March passed quickly. In this era when the earth is still desolate, because there are no short-lived humans to compare, the gods' perception of time is always not profound. The moon at this time is shorter for the gods than the sky in the future. The banquet is about to end, but just as the king of gods is about to raise his glass, an unexpected topic has aroused heated discussion among the gods and finally stabbed in front of him. The cause of the matter is very simple. Just like the experience of the king of gods in the past 1,000 years, the god of destruction, Kur, has visited more than one god on earth. Living in the desolate underworld, even plants are difficult to grow. For Kur, this is already one of his rare entertainment activities. Thanks to him, the gods have become interested in the non-god intelligent life of nymph. But Kur claimed that this was the creation of Ms. Night. They did not dare to face the power of the ancient god of creation, so they had to put away their thoughts. Until today, Ryan created a monster comparable to a true god in public, and the Titan gods finally remembered that Ms. Night seemed to have these lives called nymphs after going to the underworld. In addition, Ryan has the priesthood of spirituality and has obtained the life bottle from the Earth Mother. Many gods can't help but have some speculations. The gods talked a lot at the banquet, and finally, the god of speech Epitus stood up first. As the only two weak gods in the Titans, the god of speech can't feel the dignity of being a god at all. Compared with other gods, he hopes that there will be more weak but thoughtful lives on earth. Happiness is always derived from comparison. This is true for people, and gods are no exception. So under the gaze of the gods, Kronos quietly listened to Epitus' story. The god of speech hopes that the king of gods can create some new life on the earth like Ryan and the mother of night. I understand what you mean. But I am not very clear about this matter. Sitting on the high platform, Kronos lied with his eyes open. I once borrowed the life bottle from the mother goddess, but failed to create a conscious life. Perhaps the wisdom of life is different from that of plants, and it involves the authority of other fields. As for how His Highness Ryan and His Highness Nyx did it, I don't know. As ancient gods born at the beginning of creation, perhaps they know some secrets that I don't know. Although Kronos had heard about the existence of spiritual life from Themis a long time ago, he still pretended not to know. Others may not know about him and Themis borrowing the life bottle, but the god of speech and the god of weather, Creus, are neighbors with him on the sacred mountain, and they know this very well. Now that Epitus mentioned this matter, he just wanted him to come forward and ask one of the two ancient gods for help in the name of the king of gods. Although Kronos also agreed with the creation of life, it was absolutely impossible for him to find someone by himself. As Kronos finished speaking, the Titans of the first generation looked at each other. They did not express their opinions, but the gods of the new generation began to discuss it. Most of the new gods had never seen the Earth Mother, and the things of the previous era only remained in legends. Now that they heard that the king of gods had failed to create life, they could not help but feel a little disappointed. Even the life bottle can't create living beings. Unbelievable, I thought the Earth Mother's treasure was the source of life. I heard that the original bottle contained a seed of all things, and the Earth Mother used it to plant a golden apple tree. I don't know if using the golden apple can create intelligent life. It seems that the God King is just like this. It is said that the previous God King has the power to rival the Night Mother. If he is still alive, I am afraid he can also create life like His Highness Nyx. I heard from my father that when the Lord of the Sky was still there, my cousin didn't even dare to breathe. Is that so? You mountain gods know a lot. His Highness Araya is one of the few ancient gods who has not been oppressed by the Father of Heaven. Of course, he is not shy about these things. It is naturally different for you Titans. His face did not change, but Kronos couldn't help listening to the increasingly biased discussion of the gods. Glancing at the god of speech, Kronos decided that since you are so interested in creating life, let you face Ryan. Ahem. Clearing his throat, Kronos attracted the attention of all the gods. He looked at Epitus and said with a gentle smile, Epitus, the god in charge of speech, may be more proficient in giving wisdom to creation than the respected lord of the spirit world. Since you proposed this matter, my brother, I will leave it to you. In the name of the King of Gods, I entrust you to visit His Highness Ryan and ask him to come forward to create life together. If such a deed can be accomplished, I think the gods will remember your contribution. But your majesty As soon as the god king finished speaking, Epitus's face changed immediately. The battle 3 months ago was still vivid in his mind. He couldn't even beat the monster that Ryan had just created, but he didn't want to go to the underworld at all. But obviously, since there was a bird that jumped out, the gods would not give him a chance to refuse. I think what His Majesty the God King said makes sense. Oceanus spoke first. Perhaps because of Kronos' increasing power as the God King, the Lord of the Ocean used a honorific this time. Isn't the priesthood of speech used here, my brother? I believe you can convince him. If there can be conscious life all over the earth, I hope you can remember to add some new life to the sea. Yes. Pontus' eldest son, Nereus, the friend of the sea, was not far behind. There should be life near the sea. If you can do this, my father will also be grateful for your contribution. The two sea gods spoke one after another, and the gods also discussed. Finally, under the watchful eyes of the gods, Epitus took over the task. The banquet that was originally planned to end was postponed. The gods watched the god of speech go to the underworld, waiting for the results he brought. Although it was not clear what it took to create life if it was not too difficult, they did not think Ryan would refuse so many requests from gods. But whether they refused or not, whether the person who went to make the request would be remembered by the Lord of the spirit world was not within their scope of concern. Even the Lord of the Ocean, after learning that Atlas had an average relationship with his father and brothers, he no longer took this brother to heart. The priesthood of speech was too weak after all. Chapter 46 The River of Oath. After crossing the land, Epitus came to the underworld. Although strictly speaking, the underworld is also a part of the earth at this time, perhaps because it is tightly wrapped by the 4 ancient gods of creation, it feels like a world of its own. No matter where you enter the underworld, whether it is the bottom of the ocean or the center of the earth, unless it is a time-space jump like spiritual shuttle, anyone will first appear at the edge of the underworld, a place guarded by the 3-headed dog Cerberus in later generations. Behind the door is the river of pain, Acheron, and on both sides are the edges of the land of eternal night and the land of no light. No matter who wants to enter the underworld, there is only one way to cross the river. Of course, at this time, the underworld has no portal, and the river of pain has not yet been born. Carefully avoiding the territory of the 2 ancient gods of creation, the god of speech stepped into the gray plain. Of the 5 great rivers of the underworld in later times, only one is still in existence, the Styx River, which conceptually circles the underworld 7 times, but in reality connects the present world with one end and goes deep into Tartarus with the other. Epitus stopped here, nodded slightly in the direction of the River of Oath, and waited for a while. As expected, after a while, he did not get any response. But the god of speech was not angry, but continued to fly to the center of the underworld. As the goddess who governs the law of Oath of Chaos, Styx came to the underworld alone since her birth. Even her father Oceanus, the lord of the ocean, rarely saw her, so she was one of the few gods who did not visit the legislation. However, despite this, the god of speech still did not dare to ignore the other party easily. When Styx took over the authority of Oath delegated by the world, she became one of the few gods in chaos who could increase the strength of her priesthood on her own. Witnessing the Oath of God can bring her a tilt of the world's source power. Punishing the gods who broke their oaths can get extra gains. This kind of enhancement may have its limits, and the growth is very slow, but at least so far, Epitus can't see where its upper limit is. Feeling a little envious, the god of speech quickly passed over the gray plains and flew straight to the Hades moon in the sky. As a weak god, Iapetus did not fly fast. But before leaving, Kronos and the four wind gods gave him temporary blessings, allowing him to quickly travel between the sacred mountain and the underworld. So on the third day after leaving Mount Odysseus, he came to the Hades moon. According to the goddess of justice, the Hades moon is the official gateway to the residence of the Lord of the spirit world. As long as he is called here, he will receive the gods who come to visit. Respected His Highness Ryan, I am Iapetus, the god of speech. By the order of the god king, I come with the request of the gods, and I hope you can meet me. Facing the dark moon that seems to be close at hand but is actually untouchable, Iapetus said respectfully. Unlike other titans, the god of speech has no heirs. He now completely puts himself in the position of a messenger and does not intend to say a single extra word. Convey the god's intentions truthfully, and then go to the sacred mountain to reply. This is what he wants to do. As for using the priesthood to influence Ryan's decision, that is impossible. He came for the benefit of the gods, not just for himself. When he becomes the god king, he will come to serve the gods. God of speech. After a while, a strange female voice came from the side of the dark moon. Iapetus looked in the direction of the voice, and saw a goddess in a black dress silently appearing in front of him. The goddess in front of him had wings on her back, and 7 different kinds of brilliance flashed on her silver-white wings. A faint breath of divine power lingered around him. This was a god who was close to the limit of weak divine power. With a thought in his mind, the god of speech knew that, according to the instructions of Lady Justice, this was the goddess Lyanna who was in charge of the dark moon on behalf of the Lord of the spirit world. Themis advised Iapetus not to despise her, even though she often regarded herself as Lyanna's servant, but the god of speech felt that the reminder of the goddess of justice was completely redundant. Just kidding, the premise of despising is a psychological sense of superiority, but the reality is that without taking action, Iapetus knew that he could not beat the other party at all. Although the difference in divine power was not big, dark moon was not comparable to speech. So the next moment, he expressed his respect without hesitation. Respected Highness Lyanna, goddess of the moon that shines forever in the underworld, your beauty is amazing. I obeyed the request of the gods and came here to visit the Lord of the spirit world and ask him for the secrets of creation. Please lead the way for me. Nodding, Lyanna accepted the salute of the gods in front of her, but she did not mean to open the portal to the spirit world. Now Ryan is not the god of prophecy who could not predict anything before. Not long after he returned to the spirit world, he had already felt the rhythm of fate. Although he never actively observed his own fate as a symbol of uncertain fate and a destined observer, Ryan can always get some revelations from fate more or less. The closer a thing is to him, the lower the level of power involved, the higher the probability and clarity of the revelation. Undoubtedly, in the destined trajectory, the birth of creatures on Earth is extremely important, and the participation of the soul in it is also high enough, so Ryan naturally foresaw the visit of Iapetus. The Lord already knows your purpose, Lyanna said calmly, facing the gaze of the god of speech. Simply creating a body is not enough to make living beings intelligent. Living beings also need souls to carry thoughts and memories. The Lord can give souls to all things, but it is up to you to figure out how to shape the body. After the words fell, Lyanna quietly waited for the answer. As she said, Blaine had no interest in participating in the preparation of creation. Although he also looks forward to life, he is only willing to give souls, and at most he can witness the birth of a golden human being in person. Anyway, the first generation of life has no ability to reproduce and will eventually die. The gods simply wanted to create retainers and pets, not a species that could perpetuate itself. Even when he created humans, he actually wanted to test his conjectures. After all, humans in the Golden Age were actually quite different from the human he understood. With a lifespan of thousands of years, an appearance that remains unchanged even after birth, and an appearance that remains unchanged even after death, as well as a life that has only devout beliefs and positive emotions, as if it were stamped with thoughts, this kind of life, apart from its similar appearance, is actually very different from Ryan. There is nothing resembling a human being. Even from the perspective of human nature, the gods of chaos at this time are far closer to the human beings in Ryan's understanding than the mortals in the Golden and Silver Ages. Chapter 47 All things will eventually die. I understand. Iapetus bowed slightly in front of Lyanna. I will definitely convey the meaning of the Lord of the spirit world. But I hope you can give a more detailed description so that I can present it to the God King. Nodding, Lyanna calmly said the decision that Lyanna had made in advance. The Lord can give thoughts to all things, But the gods need to create life themselves, determine the nature of their creations, and give them corresponding powers. Whether it is appearance or ability, it is the gods' own business. The Lord will only give them souls at the end of everything according to the predetermined requirements, and when they die, the souls of all things will return to the arms of my Lord. Death. Hearing this, Epictetus was a little surprised. This is a word he has never heard of. There is no death in the language of the gods where chaos was born naturally. Yes, death. This is a word in the language of the spirit world that describes extinction and the end. Nodding, Lyanna explained. Ryan used the oldest source of text on the oracle slab to evolve the spirit text, which naturally has its own pronunciation. Many words that are not in Chaos's divine language can be found in the language of the spirit world. Death is one of them, and the wine that is indispensable at the banquet of the gods now comes from this. I'm very sorry, but respected goddess of the underworld, I don't quite understand why life will die after gaining thinking. On the side, after listening to Lyanna's explanation, Epictetus was still a little puzzled. The Lord of the spirit world is not interested in fabricating a body, and the god of speech is not surprised. Even if he hasn't done it yet, he can think of it. Creating life is by no means an easy task. But when it comes to death, Epictetus can't understand it. In the past years, he has never seen a spiritual thing die, or he doesn't understand why there is death. In the impression of God, all conscious existence is eternal. Being imprisoned in the abyss is already a terrible punishment, and eternal sleep is the most unacceptable ending. As for the end and extinction, people cannot imagine and understand things beyond their understanding, and so can gods. Facing Epictetus's doubts, Lyanna said lightly. Before the Lord gathered the power of spiritual life, it was not that there was no life with consciousness, such as plants. You cannot perceive their hazy thoughts, which does not mean that they do not exist, but that this weak thinking is not enough to form a soul. Just as plants can be destroyed, thinking life can also die. In this world, only gods are immortal. Unless the gods sever part of their divinity, all things will eventually die, which is also the destined ending of fate. What about the soul? After a moment of silence, the god of speech keenly discovered the question. The body of life will die, but won't their souls die? Of course, but it will die more slowly. Lyanna had expected the ignorance of the gods in the outside world, so she continued to explain. In the world, matter is easier to manifest than spirituality, so the body is easier to decay than the soul. When the mortal body dies, its soul is far from the end. Life belongs to the gods, but the soul belongs to my Lord. When they lose their sustenance in the world, they should naturally return to the spiritual world and return to the embrace of the spiritual master. I understand. Epictetus nodded, indicating that he understood. He could accept such a result, but the gods might not have objections to it. But that had nothing to do with him. After all, he was just a messenger. Life and death are really magical phenomena, but they also make sense. How can the creations of the gods be compared with their creators? Death is indeed a very good existence. It allows them to realize the difference between gods and themselves after they have thoughts. With some emotion, Epictetus finally said, I will convey His Highness Ryan's intentions truthfully, but the specific decision will be handed over to the God King for the final decision. Then go. Lyanna said lightly, the decision of the gods is their business, and my lord's intention has been expressed. If anyone still has objections, let him try to come to the spirit world. If he can come in, my lord will take the time to see him. Now, you can leave. After calmly saying the last sentence, Lyanna's wings behind her fluttered gently. In a trance, she disappeared silently in front of Epictetus. Watching Lyanna disappear as she came, the god of speech waited for a while in the same place and then turned and left. He didn't know whether the gods would accept the idea of souls returning to the underworld after death. After all, death was a new thing for all the gods today. But since the result had been received, Epictetus simply handed the decision back to the gods. No matter what the final result was, his mission was over. 3 days later, with the help of wind and space, Epictetus rushed back to the sacred mountain. Just like 6 days ago, the banquet of the gods was still going on, and they were all waiting for the return of the god of speech. In front of the gods, he recounted his experiences of this trip one by one, especially emphasizing his own difficulties and how he cleverly used his divine power to convince the mysterious ancient god. I tried my best to persuade him. And finally, His Highness Ryan told me that only when the body and soul come together can life have thoughts. He promised to give souls to all things after the gods created them, and I am very grateful for his kindness. After listening to the god of speech, the gods were moved by his words. They really felt Epidus's hard work, and even many gods with weaker powers respected him. But in the end, His Highness Ryan told me that non-god life will die. All things will die, and the decay of matter is much faster than the soul, so the soul of the living after death should also return to the spirit world. Death. Excuse me, is this a new word? Next to the Queen Rhea, the three white oak goddesses born from the blood of Uranus asked. Like Epidus before, the gods present also expressed doubts. Seeing this, the god of speech repeated in detail the news he got from Lyanna. The gods had different reactions to this. When the true gods pay attention, they can sense the hazy thoughts of plants. Just like people don't care about ants, the gods in the past never cared about this. In the end, they all accepted the existence of death. It is reasonable to use life and death to define the difference between mortals and gods. It may be more troublesome later. Every few thousand years, they have to create a batch of life. The last problem of creating life has been solved. Seeing that this trip is complete, the god of speech is ready to return to his seat. But at this moment, the eldest son of the ancient sea god Pontus suddenly stood up. That is the sea friendliness, a sea god with a good relationship with many gods. Even in the ocean god system, many gods have a good impression of him. His Highness Ryan is willing to give life a soul, and I am very grateful to him. In his usual spring breeze tone, Nereus looked at Epidus and said slowly, but is the ownership of the soul still to be discussed? I think this should not be my own idea. Chapter 48 Creating Life. In the main hall, Nereus was still expressing his opinions. Many gods don't actually care about the ownership of souls, and they don't understand the value of souls now. Just out of the idea that I don't need to pay anything anyway, they choose to sit back and watch. And I have to say that at first glance, Nereus's subsequent views seem quite reasonable. Everyone, the soul is just a creation of authority. It is not a precious thing. It is to His Highness Ryan, just like the sea water is to me, and the rocks are to His Highness Uriah. It is insignificant in itself. As long as you don't create too many, there will be nothing. What a burden. Furthermore, I heard that His Highness Ryan also possesses the priesthood of memory. From this perspective, the soul of creation should also belong to each god himself. Nodding slightly, at least for the latter, many gods showed expressions of approval. The souls of mortal things contain memories, and no god wants his secrets to be known to others. Maybe if they didn't pay attention, they might have said things that they shouldn't know in front of mortal beings. But you can give divinity. Listening to the discussion of the gods, the goddess of justice spoke. It is also a burden for God to immortalize too many creatures, but it is different for a few. As long as those you favor are immortal, there will naturally be no problem of souls returning. Faced with Themis's suggestion, the gods fell silent. It's not that all of them didn't think of it, but the few who thought of it didn't mention it. After all, they weren't the ones who gave their souls. Let's try again. Finally, a god suggested, it's just some souls. Maybe His Highness Ryan will change his mind. As soon as this suggestion came out, some gods agreed. And many more chose to acquiesce. But this time, Epidus refused to go again. He had already served as a messenger once, and got pretty good results, so the gods did not force him, but sent Zephyrus, the god of the west wind. Although the god of wind and the god of stars are brothers and sisters, the blood relationship in the world of chaos is really not looked down upon by many gods. Compared to their grandfather, they were closer to Cleos, who was in charge of the weather, so even though the star gods had returned to the sky with Hyperion, the four wind gods still chose to stay. After taking over the appointment, Zephyros set off immediately. He transformed into an invisible air current and rushed to the underworld along the cracks in the earth. But this time, after more than half a month, when the god of wind returned, he said angrily that no god cared about him at all. He stayed in front of the dark moon for more than 10 days and tried every means to find the entrance to the spirit world, but the result was obvious, so he had to return the way he came. There is no need to send more people. The god king finally spoke, and he knew this would be the result. Only these stupid guys would think that Ryan was willing to give life to souls because of the requirements of the gods. As early as Themis saw life in the spiritual world, he had already questioned it. Ryan is happy to see the emergence of life. The god king is sure of this, but he definitely has other desires for it, but Cronus still sits back and watches the useless actions of the gods. Now, watching the function return without success, Cronus couldn't help but feel an inexplicable sense of pleasure. Only the wisdom of the god king can discover the true side of certain gods, instead of being like them, who still don't know that there are gods who can devour the origin. If Ryan were here, he would tell Cronus that this is a sense of superiority, that I am alone when everyone is drunk, and I am alone when the whole world is dirty. The spiritual master is entitled to ownership of the soul, a right conferred upon him by the priesthood. Looking at the gods, Cronus said unhurriedly. So if no one is willing to try and use his power to change the outcome, then that's settled. 500 years later, we will go together to ask the Earth Mother for the Aquarius of life, use it to create the body of a living being, and then His Highness Ryan will give the soul. So be it. Oceanus sighed. Although he was also interested in souls, it was not enough for him to do anything about it. After all, he is not very clear about the meaning of the existence of the soul. As for Cronus talking about 500 years in the future, he was not surprised. It was a foregone conclusion that the son of the sun god would move the sun in his stead. Although everyone knows that even 500 years later, Helios will never be his father's opponent, but this god king may be planning to take the opportunity to do something. The father of many star gods is Astraeus, the eldest son of the weather god Cleos. If the god king takes another sun god under his command, even other titans will only recognize that he has the qualifications to intervene in the starry sky. Then it's settled. We each create the lives we want and each have ownership of them. The god of the earth created the things on the earth, and the god of the sea created the things of the sea. They have nothing to do with each other. The gods nodded. Neither the god king nor the ocean god lord wanted to come forward, so naturally they would not do anything unnecessary. The matter of life has been decided, and the party should also come to an end. But in the end, Cronus made a proposal that aroused the interest of the gods. He hopes to create a special species similar to gods, but without divinity. His Majesty the God King, is it really necessary to gather the power of the gods to jointly create a species? Of course. Cronus said with a smile, I plan to imitate the gods and create a race that worships us. Even with the life Aquarius, none of us are gods who are good at creation. No one can accomplish such a feat alone. But if we join forces, this kind of life may be born. I agree. Epidus was the first to support. He first came up with the idea of creating life because of his insignificance among the gods. Rather than showing authority in front of a group of grotesque beings, he would rather have some beings similar to himself, but much weaker. Creating life forms like us, does this undermine the majesty of the gods? Yashin asked. No, they will die, but we will not. Although I haven't seen yet, what exactly is death? Queen Rhea's words made the gods nod. The goddess seldom spoke, but since it was her husband's suggestion, she still supported it. After glancing at the gods, Cronus nodded with satisfaction. He doesn't care what Ryan thinks about souls, but filling the earth with life under his rule can also enhance the power of the God King. Themis's behavior gave him some inspiration. Although the guy who lives in the spirit world has many conspiracies, he can still get some benefits as long as he doesn't plot against himself. As for his last proposal, in fact, at this point, he and Epidus wanted to go together. As the king of the gods, his status among the gods is not as high as that of Ocean God Lord and his two uncles. Even if the priesthood of the sun god had not been divided, and Thea would still need some years to achieve powerful divine power, I am afraid that Hyperion would have a greater sense of presence than him. In this case, creating some creatures similar to the gods and watching them worship you might not be an option. On the other hand, he also needs some other lives in his palace. Like now, even serving food and drinks requires the gods to do it themselves. Cronus also hopes that there will be some creatures that meet the aesthetics of the gods to complete these trivial tasks for him. Since everyone has no objections, Cronus finally said, then let's end today's party. 500 years from now, any gods who are interested in participating in this matter can go to the shores of the East China Sea and visit the Earth Mother together. Creating life is not a simple matter, and I guess you all need some time to prepare. Chapter 49 God King and Mother Earth. 500 years have passed under the shining sun since the banquet on the sacred mountain came to an end. Unlike the quietness on the earth, the sequel of Ryan's fight with the sun god is still going on in the starry sky. Back in the starry sky, Hyperion fulfilled his oath to the Styx River. He handed the sun over to his eldest son, Helios, who was born nearly 1,000 years ago but still maintained a weak divine power. So for thousands of years, the sun, which had been hanging in the sky for thousands of years, began to move according to its trajectory for the first time. But to the surprise of many gods, the movement of the sun was not as smooth as they thought. Perhaps because the divine power was too low, or perhaps because of the non-cooperation of another sun master under Hyperion's cold eyes. Without the assistance of his father, Helios could not move the sun freely. His power was so weak that even if he just let the sun move a small distance, he was exhausted. For this reason, he asked the king of gods for help, but Kronos had no way to think of it. Hyperion did not break the agreement. He did not try to stop Helios. He just merged into the sun and became one with it. This behavior increased the weight of this celestial body. If Helios was a god with medium or higher divine power, he could still control the sun freely. But because of his father's suppression in the past years, his power was the bottom of the true gods. The god king was very disappointed with this. He had many plans, such as secretly supporting Helios and continuing to be in charge of this in 500 years. He knew that the other party would agree. But what he never expected was that the other party could not perform his divine duties. In this way, Kronos' idea of winning without fighting was shattered. He had to prepare and intervene in the starry sky with more direct means. But what happened next disappointed Kronos again. About 200 years after the sun changed hands, endless light illuminated the earth, and the Mother of Light finally entered the realm of powerful divine power. Seeing this, Kronos had to sigh that time was not for me, and then temporarily put aside this idea. In this situation, when the deadline of 500 years passed, Hyperion roughly imprisoned his eldest son on the surface of the sun, and then took over the sun again. This time he learned his lesson. Although the rising and setting of the sun was not his authority, he still took the initiative to move the celestial body to complete this behavior. With his divine power, although it seemed a little troublesome to make the sun move every day, it was not a big deal. However, as a result, the contradiction between the father and son of the sun god was completely exposed. In such an environment, one day 500 years later, the gods gathered at the shore of the East China Sea, the nameless retreat of the Earth Mother. They will create the first life on Earth here. Are you still not giving up? Beside a stream near the East China Sea, the Earth Mother held the emerald green treasure bottle in her hands. The gods were waiting in the distance, and only a few Titan gods came to visit the Earth Mother here. Many years have passed since the change of the gods and kings. With the increase of the world's source power, the Earth has grown, and the Earth Mother has also gained a lot of benefits. Although the damage she had suffered had not yet fully recovered, at first glance, she was no longer an old woman, but a wealthy woman in her 50s or 60s. Kronos and Themis had come once before, and the Earth Mother thought they had given up. But unexpectedly, not only did they come again this time, but they also brought more than half of Chaos' true gods. Mother Goddess, we failed to create creatures before because we lacked souls. But now, the Lord of the spirit world has agreed to lend a hand. Facing the Earth Mother's questioning, Kronos whispered. If possible, he actually didn't want to explain. Among the gods present, he was probably the only one who guessed the truth about the Earth Mother's anger thousands of years ago. Perhaps the original life bottle could create complete life, like plants, although they did not have specific consciousness. They were by no means completely absent, but that consciousness was very hazy and vague. But now, thinking about his own origin of time and space, Kronos was ready for the Earth Mother to be angry. Lion. As expected, Gaia's face suddenly changed when he heard this familiar name. The surrounding earth shook as if responding to the Earth Mother's anger, but soon, she thought of something and endured it again. Since you already have his help, why do you come to me for anything? Although she didn't get angry, the Earth Mother's expression was still visibly cold. As long as you have a soul, you can also create life with your divine power, so why bother to borrow the life bottle? Facing the Earth Mother's accusation, Kronos' expression remained unchanged. He was actually a little surprised, thinking that the Earth Mother would have a more intense reaction when hearing Ryan's name. But this is none of his business. As a primitive god, even if she is the worst, the Earth Mother can often get some information that ordinary people don't know. Maybe she learned something from the Night Mother, so she didn't bother Ryan. Thinking of this, Kronos couldn't help but admire his wit again. How can a fool like Hyperion compare with him? Mother Goddess, the gods are not planning to create only a few lives. We plan to spread all living things all over the earth. Without the authority related to life, this is difficult to accomplish. Moreover, we are also planning to create a special species in the image of the gods. Gaia raised her head slightly. Although she was still angry, she was still interested in Kronos' words. The species created in the image of the gods were indeed very interesting. If you like, we can start creating things around here. Seeing that the Earth Mother was attracted, Kronos continued, You can also come and see our progress in your spare time. After all, you have more experience than us in the field of creating life. After thinking for a while, the Earth Mother was finally moved by Kronos. Not only because of the special species, but also because it was the common idea of many gods. After experiencing the era of Uranus, Gaia has vaguely realized the importance of power and strength. Earth is not good at fighting. Instead of showing off its military power, it is better to use other methods to reflect its status. Take it. After all, you are already the God King, right? Take out the life bottle, and the Earth Mother still stabbed Kronos. The God King did not take it as an offense, but took over this high-level artifact in the field of life. He knew that because he did not release the Cyclops and the 100-armed giant, the Earth Mother had always had an opinion on him, but Kronos still did not intend to release them. In fact, Kronos did it on purpose from the beginning. He knew that his refusal would not cause too much hostility from the Earth Mother, but it was enough to make the only primitive god walking in the world leave the sacred mountain and express his dissatisfaction. But Gaia's departure was exactly what Kronos wanted. If his brothers all left, but the Earth Mother still stayed, and he did not have enough power, then he really didn't know who Mount Odal should belong to. If he couldn't even fully control the place where he lived, then this king of gods would be too ridiculous. Now that time has passed, Kronos has firmly sat on the throne, but he still doesn't want Gaia to return to live in the sacred mountain. As his queen, Rhea has always been with him. Since the last time he secretly helped Hyperion and failed, the god of weather also chose to completely turn to Kronos. Today's Mount Odals does not need a primitive god who does not obey the orders of the king of gods. And the world is urging us. Increasing power can indeed delay it, but as the god king of chaos, giving birth to gods is a responsibility that I cannot avoid. With a cold look in his eyes, Kronos didn't know what the Earth Mother would think of his plans in the future, but he didn't want to know. No matter who it is, if they threaten his position as the god king, they are his enemies. This goes for children, brothers, and the Earth Mother, too. Chapter 50 The Beginning of Life. Decades have passed since Cronus obtained the vase of life from Gaia. Not far from the residence of Mother Earth, the gods found a large plain. They gathered here and tried to create various kinds of life with the help of the source liquid flowing out of the artifact. Their selection is very random. The sediment at the bottom of the river, the fallen leaves beside the trees, the earth and rocks on the ground, and the clouds in the sky. The gods shape them into the shapes they want, and then merge them with the divine liquid. If their creation conforms to the basic rules of life, a species is born. Next, just use this as a template, and thousands of creations of the same kind will appear. However, although it sounds simple, it is not so easy to actually do it. The gods, who had never experienced creation, tried many structures, but most of them ended in failure. For them, how to create the first one is the biggest problem. In the end, after nearly 100 years of exploration, a total of 8,400 new species appeared on the Earth. In the sky, in the earth, in the sea, every true god has created more or less several kinds. Although they do not have souls at this time, from a biological point of view, they are already living creatures. Finally finished. Looking at a strange fish in front of him, Lord Ocean wrapped it with divine power to maintain its life. For the first time in thousands of years since Heavenly Father ascended to heaven, he showed a tired look. Although his divine power was still abundant, Oceanus felt powerless. Metis, my daughter, this is the end of it. Shaking his head at the young and beautiful goddess beside him, Oceanus did not intend to continue. Okay, father, this is indeed the limit of our abilities. The goddess Metis was a little regretful. Although according to her idea, life swimming in the sea does not need limbs, but in practice, neither of them knew what to do with this fish. It's not over yet, Oceanos, we still have a species we haven't created yet. Looking at his former eldest brother and niece, Cronus had not changed much. Without him, the God King had nothing to create, and he had mostly just given ideas to other gods over the years. After all, the sacred mountain is only that big, and he is not prepared to allow beings without divinity to enter his palace. These simple lives are already so difficult to create. Creating life in the image of the gods will not be possible even if we give it another 500 years. Shaking her head, the original water goddess Thesis had given up hope. Even if the mother goddess is willing to take action, the life Aquarius is only an artifact of the mother goddess after all, and she does not really possess the priesthood of life. Plants are very compatible with Earth, but living things similar to those of the gods, I'm afraid the mother goddess doesn't have any other options. You don't know how difficult it is to create life until you try it yourself. In the original trajectory, Iapetus, the god of souls, created the golden humans and the silver humans. Some people say that Gaia created the golden humans. But as for the process of their creation, the myth is only passing by. No one knows how much energy these two gods spent on this. The original water goddess secretly swore that when these creations died, she would never create life herself again and would leave these complicated things to others. Frowning slightly, Cronus was also a little troubled. He now also found that his previous ideas were still too simple. It seems that if you want the god-like creature you envisioned to be born, you have to let professionals do it. Thinking of what the goddess of law had said about the spiritual world, Cronus secretly made a decision. Iapachus, my brother, I am afraid I will have to trouble you to make another trip. Turning around to look at the god of speech not far away, the god king's smile was very warm, but his tone was unquestionable. Creation is coming to an end, and it's time to invite His Highness Ryan to come. In addition to the matter of giving souls, I also have many things to ask about the creation of this last species. Your Majesty the God King, I think, huh? The god of speech, who was once again caught in a rut, was about to refuse, but at the next moment, several gods present, including him, looked not far away. The space shook for a while, and under the gaze of the three powerful gods, Ryan's figure quietly emerged. No need to bother, I'm already here. Reaching out to smooth out the space ripples he created, Ryan said with a smile. His Royal Highness Ryan's control over destiny is truly amazing. Tez's sighed. If it weren't for Ryan rarely moving around in the world, she would have long wanted to use the traditional arts of the oceanic gods to introduce a goddess to this most ancient god. Unfortunately, unlike the other gods of chaos, this ancient god who has always lived in the underworld seems to have little interest in banquets and entertainment. At least in these years, Tez's had never seen him in the palace of any god. Of course, if Ryan knew what the other person was thinking, he could only say that it was not that he was not interested in entertainment, but that he was not interested in current entertainment. In an era when music and dance had not even been invented, could it be that Ryan went to the shrines of other gods just to drink 2 glasses of crude wine? Haha, now that the Lord of the Spirit World has arrived, it seems that our final creation is almost completed. Although Kronos couldn't help but twitch the corners of his eyes when he saw the fluctuations in space, he still laughed to welcome Ryan's arrival. After so many years, Kronos gradually accepted the facts. He no longer gritted his teeth when he heard Ryan's name like he once did in front of Themis. Yes, to create humans, that's why I'm here. Nodding, Ryan glanced at the strange-looking fish in front of God Lord Ocean, showing a look of interest. Is this the life created by His Highness Oceanus? It looks really strange. Hearing this, Lord Dang looked a little unnatural. Just like Uranus refused to hate the giants, for the current gods, ugliness is completely normal. Well, this is indeed the creation of the Lord of the Outer Sea and his daughter, but it is not perfect yet. If His Highness Ryan is interested, you can also help repair it. Okay then. Wisdom Metis, I have long admired your name. With a slight nod, Ryan said hello to the goddess beside Lord Ocean, and Metis also smiled back. He knew what Cronus meant. He wanted to further confirm his attainments in the field of life. After all, hearing is false and seeing is believing. But Ryan also had this intention. At least for the first batch of humans, he was still very interested in getting started. Stretching out his right hand, green light emerged in Ryan's palm. Although he only controls the life authority related to spirituality, this part is integrated with the rest of the life Aquarius in terms of attainments in the life field. Gaia may not be able to match him. Besides, for Ryan, creating life is a bit like copying homework. Holding the light of life in his hand, Ryan gently touched the fish. As the light entered the body, the bone spurs that were originally transparent disappeared, and the twisted spine was straightened. The arms used to fluctuate the water flow became fish fins, the burrs on the surface turned into fish scales, and the body became more in line with the structure of fluids. Almost in the blink of an eye, the original Cthulhu-style fish turned into a normal animal, and the 3 oceanic gods around him were stunned. If the previous fish hadn't been created bit by themselves, they wouldn't have felt that way. But it is with some experience that they can truly understand the subtleties of this hand. Seeing this scene, even Cronus was a little surprised. He had never believed in the saying that the world was created in 7 days and all living things were created on the 5th and 6th days. The God King originally thought that Ryan could spend a few days making this fish look more attractive, which would be enough to lead the creation of godlike life. But he never expected that he didn't even use it for a minute. In a hurry, this is all we can do. It seemed that he was still not very satisfied with his work, but Ryan made no further moves. He looked at the God King beside him. He smiled and said, "Destiny led me here just for the birth of human beings. Now that everything is ready, let's start creating humans." Chapter 51 Golden Human. On the shore of the East China Sea, when Ryan also came here, the work of creating humans really began. Without wasting time, Kronos summoned the gods in an open space near the river. They mixed their blood with soil and dripped it into the original liquid flowing out of the life bottle. The gods exerted divine power on these raw materials, allowing them to gain extraordinary essence and be naturally close to the gods. The raw materials were made, and under the watchful eyes of the gods, Ryan used these raw materials to shape the first human body. He first sketched out an appearance and let the skin wrap it outside. Then, he shaped the flesh, meridians, and internal organs, so that the power of life could cleverly achieve a balance in the human body. Then, Ryan determined the position of the bones and the direction of blood flow, so that the blood and chi circulated in the human body. Finally, he added bone marrow, heart, and brain to give life power. 6 days passed, and even with Ryan's control of life and his understanding of the human body, he made several mistakes before he succeeded. At the end, Ryan put eyes on it, and the first human body was born. This is the first human and the most perfect human. In him, the gods seem to see the characteristics of each of their gods. He will become the template of the golden human and their future leader. When everything was completed, Ryan brushed his sleeves and took a long whip from his waist. This is the prototype of the artifact that Ryan shaped with part of earth and water after the power of the elements merged into the spiritual world. Its power is not strong, because Chaos's related source power has already been owned, but Ryan still chose it, because humans are not different because they are born strong. Ryan intends to see if this long whip will undergo some interesting changes when several eras pass and civilization develops to its peak. Snap. Rolling up the remaining materials for creating the first human, Ryan mixed it with more soil and original liquid. Then he shook the long whip lightly, and the mud spots flew all over the sky and then fell to the ground. When it falls, it changes. In a blink of an eye, the brown mud spots turned into hundreds of thousands of humans. They also have the blessings of the gods, but after being separated, they seem a little weak. Amazing skills. Although he sensed that the Earth Mother was watching from afar, Kronos couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Although it is not difficult for the gods to create according to the first model, it is very difficult for Ryan to replicate hundreds of thousands of them with a whip, even with the help of a divine weapon. After all, everyone can see that. The divine weapon in Ryan's hand is not strong, and it has not even been fully forged. Just a little trick. Ryan didn't care about Kronos' admiration. At the same time, he also sensed the unfriendly gaze of the Earth Mother in the distance. Ryan laughed it off. He had already got all the benefits, so he naturally didn't plan to provoke the old man again. Although from the perspective of age, he is the real old man. The body has been built. Next, I will give them souls. But souls have biases. It is up to you to decide what life will become. Other lives will be decided by the gods who created them. Kronos said, "But humans, since you call them that, Your Highness Ryan, just call them humans. I think that as the creation of the gods, humans should have all good, beautiful, and kind emotions. They should be pious and regard the gods as the supreme. They should be fearless and willing to give everything for the gods. They should also be diligent and intelligent, and be able to complete the tasks assigned to them by the gods. Of course, in return, I allow them to feed on plants and other lives created by the gods. They are the leaders of all spirits and the closest gods among all things." The voice of the God King spread far and wide, and the gods did not object. Although some gods did not agree with this, they did not stand up to speak, and everything was settled. So then, Ryan collected all the gods' ideas about their respective creations. Finally, he stood by the river, looking at the bodies of countless creatures on the plain in front of him, and an invisible force slowly extended from the void. With a gentle wave of his arm, the lives created by the gods in the past 100 years approached him and floated in the air. Only humans stood on the ground, surrounding him in a circle. The divine power began to surge, and the surrounding time and space became chaotic. In a trance, the gods vaguely saw the 7 layers of the world slowly emerging behind Ryan, but only the mountain in the center seemed clearer. At the top of the mountain, behind the palace group, there was an indescribable well. It was infinitely large and infinitely small, making anyone who saw it feel a sense of desire from the heart. Well of eternity, origin, condensed by the part of the origin of life that Ryan took. It is the source of the birth of all souls in the world, and any life that drinks its well water can obtain immortal divinity. Come minus minus. Accompanied by a long and gentle drink, the transparent well water moved in response. It flows out of the well, passes through the 7 spiritual realms, combines with different emotions, and then turns into mist, covering all the lives present. On the side, the life bottle still held in the hands of the god king trembles slightly. It was originally a part of it, but now it can never be united. When the 2 original liquids symbolizing matter and spirituality converge again, true life is born. From today on, you are the king of mankind. Pointing to the first creation, the first human to open his eyes, Ryan announced calmly. At the same time, the 3 artifacts involved in the creation all trembled, and after a while, their auras became significantly stronger. On the other hand, when such a large number of lives were born on the earth, the source power of the world seemed to have increased. But because there were only males at this time, they lived long but could not reproduce, so the increase in source power was not significant. The gods did not benefit from it, but Kronos, as the king of gods, was different. In the perception of the gods, his divine power directly reached the level of 19, close to the peak of powerful divine power, and he became the head of the gods. This is the particularity of the power of the king of gods. It is essentially an external power, not the gods themselves. Therefore, Themis, whose divine origin has been improved, still needs thousands of years to accumulate divine power to reach this step, but Kronos has it directly. Cohen, from today on, you will be called Cohen. Under the gaze of the gods, Kronos restrained his unconscious divine power and said to the first human. At this time on the earth, Cohen, who had just been named the king of mankind by the creator and was given a name by another god, knelt on the ground and thanked the gods for their kindness. Seeing this, the gods smiled. The existence that looks like a god now worships them, which is one of the purposes of their creation of humans. Standing aside, Ryan watched all this calmly. Like a few gods, he didn't think there was anything to be happy about, so he didn't laugh, just watched silently. He had always said before that golden humans are not considered humans, but he thought that when he really witnessed the birth of humans and witnessed the emergence of life similar to his old self, he would have some other emotions, but the fact is that he doesn't feel anything now. When he personally molded the first human, when he set the rules for the emotions of the golden humans like writing a setting, when he looked at the hundreds of thousands of bewildered humans in front of him, for some reason, Ryan no longer felt that they were anything special. This is the golden human? Shaking his head, Ryan finally said nothing. He just dispersed the shadow of the spirit world and waited quietly.